Hey, you guys want to see a bad take? Let's watch a bad take. Moving on to Bucks versus Heat. Miami has no chance in this series. Now, I realize that you might look at that and say, how exactly is that some sort of hot take or overreaction? That's kind of what everybody's been saying going into it. But really, looking at it, of course, Miami won game one. So if anything, you should feel more optimistic about Miami. But frankly, it was the way in which they won this game that made me all the more certain that they are doomed. Yeah. That did not age well. To be fair, it was in a video titled Overreacting to Every Game Won, but I pretty strongly believed that take. And yet now, the Miami Heat are up 3-1 on the Milwaukee Bucks. So, what the hell happened there? Let's talk about it. Real quick before I get into this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe. Also drop a like. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. The first thing I want to say right out of the gate is, as provocative as this title is, that was really just to get you to click on the video, and I don't actually really think that the Bucks deserve some crazy wave of scrutiny here. Obviously, there is the fact that Giannis has only played 2 games in this series, and then there is also the fact that the Heat have been first in field goal percentage thus far, first in three-point percentage, and obviously we got one of the most statistical outlier performances in NBA history in Game 4. Like, quite literally, the amount of points that Jimmy Butler scored in Game 4 has only been scored in the NBA playoffs 7 times, and only 1 time since 1994, that player being Donovan Mitchell when he had 57 versus the Nuggets. So, I do want to say, with all those outlier things being there, without them having their best player for 2 out of these 4 games, I'm not going to sit here and act like Milwaukee just had some all-time fumble here, because while there are definitely things to criticize them for, and I intend on doing it in this video, for the most part, I do think this series has been the Miami Heat playing up more than it has been the Bucks playing down. But of course, that offensive stuff that I mentioned, the field goal percentage, the three-point percentage, Jimmy Butler going off, that can be blamed on the defense, because defense is obviously a factor in how good the offense goes. But truthfully, just going based on my own eye test, I don't think the defense has been bad, necessarily. It's just been more a case of great offense beating good defense. I actually do think they had done their due diligence with Jimmy. Obviously, had a ridiculous performance, but almost every shot he made in that game, there was a hand up. Bam has been up and down in the series, probably more down than up, but where Milwaukee has gone wrong as a whole for this series is ironically how little they've actually respected Miami's role players. Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, and Max Strus. They have all burned this team, especially from outside, and made their presence felt. But again, we are talking about ridiculously scorching shooting here, and it's very well reasonable that you would look at this, and again, the fact that Giannis only played 2 games, and say, well, the Heat are going to regress to the mean, and that means that the Bucks can just simply come back from this 3-1 lead, and we don't have to worry about this and pretend it never really happened. Well, even if the Miami Heat do regress to the mean, it's possible for them to win a game while playing at the mean, in my opinion, and they only have to do it 1 out of the 3 attempts that they would get. So they just kind of need to have a pretty good shooting night, and all will be fine. So I'm not going to be too confident, and I do think there is a strong chance a 3-1 comeback does happen here, but you know, it's a 3-1 lead, and you should be worried, no matter what. And I've seen a couple of Bucks fans be a little bit too confident about something like this, and frankly, I think they're lying. I think they're projecting a little bit more confidence than is actually there. But let's talk about where Milwaukee truly has gone wrong in this series, outside of the issues with defending role players. I also do want to say coaching has been a factor. Eric Spoelstra, very good coach. Mike Budenholzer, And because of that, there's been some coaching decisions that have definitely not been ideal defensively. Like, for example, I just feel like Milwaukee sticks too much to their defensive game plan, like regardless of what's happening. A lack of willingness to adjust has easily been the biggest thing that people have knocked Mike Budenholzer for in the past, and that has very much shown itself in this series. Especially late in this game when Jimmy Butler started to go off more. He was already going off the full game, obviously. I really felt like that was the time to put Giannis on Jimmy. That's something that we've seen them do before. We've seen it work quite well before. We've also seen Jimmy be fine with it, but his primary defender, Jimmy's, in the series where he played terribly and scored less points than Bryn Forbes in the series versus the Bucks, Giannis was Jimmy Butler's primary defender. So, you know, maybe make that switch. That's definitely something you would hope to see them make, but if they end up blowing this series and that switch is not made, I really do think there's a strong chance Mike Budenholzer gets fired. But the big area of concern, the thing that I really truly think is this team's Achilles heel and almost always will be with this core just because. And that is the offense in the half court. It's just bad. It's just really not that great. They have moments of being good. They have quarters of being good. They have long stretches of being good. Hell, I'd say they were pretty good in the half court offense for a majority of game 4. But in tight moments when the pressure is high, this team just does not keep it together. And that's not what you want out of a team that's supposed to be a championship title favorite. So the first things first, Jesus Christ, Jrue Holiday, please get this together. I mean, he has had his issues in the playoffs, but he is 6 for 19 in game 4, and he's currently averaging 18 points in the series, which is not bad, but he's doing it on 18 shots. Jrue just needs to be better. There's just no other way to put it. I expected Chris Middleton to be the problem in this series because he's just not played a ton of basketball since having a seriously major injury, being a relatively old player. I thought he'd be the problem, if anything. I knew Jrue Holiday had his issues in the playoffs in the past, but he had the best season of his career this year. He's had the best scoring season of his career quite easily. So I figured, you know, that would kind of be something of the past, or at least it wouldn't be as bad as it has been. So Jrue Holiday, big knock on him. That's a big problem for sure. I also want to say in the case of Giannis, even though, of course, there's little to blame here because he's only played 2 games, I did feel as though he shrunk a little bit in this moment and didn't really look to attack late in that 4th quarter. And out of your superstar player, out of your 2-time MVP, out of potentially the best player in the world, I still think he is, even with the result of this series. I think it'd be kind of crazy to change that. With that being the case, you want that player to step up a little bit more than Giannis did. Obviously, the Bucks have won a championship with Giannis, so I'm not sitting here questioning if he's really the best player on a championship team or some bullshit point like that. But, you know, a little bit more. His first game back, I'll let it slide. But I just hope this isn't a pattern that continues. This is an issue we have seen with the Bucks in the half court in the playoffs before. The issue is if Giannis isn't just walking into free layups or getting fouled all the time, how exactly are they scoring? Well, the answer seems to be they're going to chuck threes, which they've elected to do quite a bit in this series. They're taking over 41 three-point attempts per game. Now, with that volume from outside, they've actually shot okay. They're shooting 37%, but they've definitely taken some bad shots. And there's been a lot of possessions where I was just like, you couldn't have just maybe waited a little bit longer and tried to get a better shot than that. It really feels like they're just taking whatever is a remotely open 3 and not necessarily waiting at all for what could potentially be a better shot. I cannot stress enough, if you're new here and you don't know my philosophies on modern basketball, I detest, generally speaking, when people use the phrase, stop chucking threes, stop putting up tons of threes, stop relying so much on threes, stop living and dying by threes, all that type of shit. They're falling in love with the three-pointer. Term I can't stand because it's just from old NBA fans who think anytime you take a 3 and it doesn't go in, it was a bad shot. But frankly, they do need to stop chucking so many threes. I don't know what else you want me to say. They have a strong interior presence, obviously, and I feel as though they didn't want to lean on it too much, so they've leaned too far in the other direction. Where I do think ultimately you should bank on the dominance of Giannis being the main source of your offense, and in this game it just felt like another part of it. It almost felt like he was more a part of the offense more than the centerpiece, and you need to get the ball to him more. You need to get out of Jrue Holiday's hands more. Obviously, Chris Middleton having his foul issues was not helpful. I believe he fouled out. But good lord, this half-court offense cannot continue to be the way that it is. Even if they manage to win this series, even if they turn it around, Giannis just puts on a masterclass for the next 3 games and closes this one out. The fact that they would have put themselves in this position to begin with makes their odds at winning a championship look a lot worse. So one way or the other, even if the Milwaukee Bucks manage to escape this series, I still feel a lot worse about them than I already did. Now, is it possible that they still manage to win the freaking championship from here? Absolutely, but they've dug themselves into a massive hole, and even with the Giannis being out, even with Miami having outlier level shooting, you need to bring your A game in the playoffs, and I haven't really felt as though they have, because really, the biggest issue to me in this one is there was a very distinct difference in the energy between these two teams. The Bucks, when they didn't have Giannis, were playing defeated, like they just couldn't do it without him, so oh well, I guess we're gonna lose. And then with them, I mean, they just continued to play fairly passive. Giannis was trying out there for the most part. Drew, frankly, I'll be nice to Drew. He was trying. He was really putting up an effort. He missed all of his shots though, so you know, thanks. But in general, there are so many plays where this is a cliche. Again, basketball cliches that I don't care for, but just are applicable to this situation. The Miami Heat have wanted this more. Jimmy Butler wanted this more than I've seen most people want anything. And that ultimately matters. Bringing your effort on every freaking possession. The thing about Jimmy Butler's performance is not only did he have 56 points, he played elite defense on the other end every possession. That kind of attention to detail, that kind of energy, that kind of we got this shit, we're going for it energy wasn't there with the Bucks. They were playing like the team that's favored to win and knows it. And they were not playing like a team that could lose. And unfortunately for them, they could. So yeah, what's to be done here? What do we think about the Bucks going forward? I think a 3-1 comeback is very much in the cards here because of the Giannis thing. And that's not a knock on Miami. They have thoroughly impressed me beyond what I thought they were even close to capable of. But ultimately, the Bucks are still the better team. And if they lose this series, the Bucks will have been a massive disappointment for it. And they just need to be better. There's no other way to put it. I think they could come back. In fact, frankly, I'm as close to betting on a 3-1 comeback as you can realistically be, because the odds are so heavily stacked in Miami's favor at that point. But also, I do think the Bucks are ultimately the better team here. I'm as close to betting on that, but ultimately I won't, because some of these issues with the Bucks are systemic and have always been there, and I just don't know if they can truly beat this Miami team with how they've been playing, the energy they've been playing with in 3 consecutive games. And that's saying a lot about Miami, and it's saying a lot about Milwaukee. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.